Today we're talking about the chaos that has been the Nintendo Switch 2 launch. From the variable game pricing Nintendo is committed to, statements issued by Nintendo execs about the launch, and what almost feels like day-to-day shifts in the market as a direct result of the tariffs announced in the US. Nintendo is facing public backlash, and rightfully so, about the $80 price point for games, the tone-deaf statements and defense they're playing about their pricing strategy, and the never-ending saga of pre-order delays, and the uncertainty of if and when they're actually going to go live. Though everything surrounding this launch has been nothing short of feeling anti-consumer and tone-deaf to where things are right now in the world, I took a look at the facts, stripping out the emotion, and understand the decisions Nintendo, the business, is making, though their approach definitely leaves plenty to be desired from a billion-dollar corporation. So in this video, I'm going to break it all down. How Nintendo's announcements impact us as consumers, the gaming industry as a whole, and what could possibly be on the horizon as a result of the ever-changing global marketplace. And if we haven't met before, I'm Suk, a designated accountant and a finance professional working for a Fortune 500 company, where strategy and helping manage public opinion is a part of the job description. Let's get into it. Right now, Nintendo is living out a PR nightmare with every news story that breaks about the Switch 2 launch. Doug Bowser dropped a few gems in his interview with the CBC where he states, "As we look at Nintendo Switch 2 and you think about the feature sets that I talked about, we believe that the pricing is appropriate for the value of the machine and the gameplay experience overall. I don't disagree with this statement. I do believe that the feature set of the console does justify its pricing. If we compare the Switch 2 to the Steam Deck or the original ROG Ally, though it's not an apples to apples comparison, the hardware is comparable. The Steam Deck and Ally are obviously geared more towards the tinkerer and not the casual gamer. There'll be settings you can tweak to make sure you're getting the best performance you can on a per game basis, whereas the Switch is a more out of the box experience. Not to mention the target markets for these devices is also vastly different. But looking at only the guts and the fact that the Switch 2's 4K dock is also part of the overall cost of the console, this reinforces to me that the Switch 2 is priced fairly and in line with similar offerings in the market. We can start breaking down the difference in storage protocols or GPU performance, but I look at these devices more so complementary to one another rather than each other's competition. But what Bowser says next could be heard all across the internet. He starts out strong by mentioning that the original Switch will continue to be supported for some time with new games still being released. But then rounds that comment out by saying, "We recognize there are some people that may not be able to afford the Switch 2's price point. That's why we want to make the other Switch platforms available, so people still have an opportunity to come into our gaming universe, be a part of these characters in these worlds, and see value, if you will, in whatever rung of the platform they come in." Essentially to say that, hey, if you can't afford it, sucks to suck. You can keep playing our 8-year-old console and continue to pay full release price for all those games and whatever else we choose to give you peasant. Now I agree, this was very poorly communicated and definitely sounds like he came off the cuff with it, and because he was unprepared, it made its round on the internet. Every YouTuber has picked it up and compared it to the infamous Don Mattrick blunder during the Xbox One release. Fellow Canadian, by the way, but I'm not sure I want to lay claim to him. Let's quickly watch that clip for context.
So it's a great line for games.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think people are going to love it, and then they're going to understand what we're trying to create and how it links games and entertainment, the functionality of the box, some of the advantages that you get of having a box that is designed to use an online state. So that, to me, is a future-proof choice, and I think people could have arguably gone the other way if we didn't do it, and fortunately we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message if you don't, like it?
If you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device. I mean, seriously, when I read the blogs and thought about who's really the most impacted, there was a person who said, "Hey, I'm on a nuclear sub, and I don't even know what it means to be on a nuclear sub, but I've got to imagine that it's not easy to get an internet connection."
Probably not playing Call of Duty multiplayer
Well,
on the sub.
yeah, but I mean, hey, I can't empathize where if I was on a sub, I'd be disappointed.
I understand the spirit of what he's saying here. He's trying to be inclusive to the original Switch gamer base and trying to say, hey, don't worry immediately about making the Switch the next iteration because we still got you. All 150 million of you. But in 3 sentences, he goes from sounding like he actually cares about us, the consumer, to corporate monster turtle, our very own real-world Bowser. However, Nintendo, the business, is making decisions that will provide continued value to the customer by bringing a console fit for the market in 2025, and are keeping it aligned with where technology should be, at a minimum. The fault here lies with the messenger they chose to deliver that value. Someone seemingly too far removed from Nintendo's target demographic. But the fun doesn't stop there. Oh no! Bowser keeps serving up the hits. After teeing up these quotes that have probably cemented his place right next to Don Mattrick, he continues to shoot from the hip and try to explain away a shift in the entire gaming landscape, seemingly unable to understand what he and Nintendo have opened the floodgates to and why the public is upset. Bowser goes on to say about Nintendo's pricing model, "What you see right there is variable pricing. We look at each game, really look at the development that's gone into the game, the breadth and depth of the gameplay, if you will, the durability over time, and the repeatability of gameplay experiences. Those are all factors, and there's many more that go into consideration of what is the right price point for the game. So I think you can anticipate that there will be variable pricing, and we haven't set a benchmark." This statement creates more questions rather than providing answers. Does this leave the door open for games to retail even higher than $80? Because that's my takeaway. Bowser leaves this open for interpretation. Not the most sound PR strategy if you ask me. Next up is Bill Trinan, Nintendo of America's VP of Product and Player Experience, who is also no wordsmith himself as he follows Bowser's lead with more nonsense by giving Forbes this about their game pricing strategy. "I would say it's less about the strategy of pricing Mario Kart World. It's more just whenever we look at a given game, we just look at what is the experience, and what's the content, and what's the value. But honestly, this is a game that is so big and so vast, and you will find so many little things in it to discover. And there's still some other secrets remaining that I think as people end up buying and playing the game, they're going to find this to be probably the richest Mario Kart experience they've ever had." Breaking this down, it's a whole lot of nothing itself. And yeah, pretty much to say that, yeah, this thing is worth $80, so deal with it. Again, I can't blame Nintendo for trying to extract value for their shareholders and the company by raising prices. The decision made by Nintendo, the business, is par for the course for any company looking to show growth year over year, especially a public company. The fault here, again, is that this was not the way to communicate this impactful of a change to consumers, a market-shifting change. We needed to be eased into something so big, but unfortunately, it felt like the rug got pulled out from under us. I think that if any game maker out there was to push the norms of the market, to me, it makes sense that it was Nintendo. They know what they're doing, though it may not seem that way from what we've seen over the last couple weeks. And their brand is synonymous with gaming. When Matthew Ball released his State of Video Gaming in 2025 essay citing GTA 6 would be that domino that changes everything, I didn't agree that this is the game and developer that could create that shift. And I know some of you out there will disagree with that take, but Nintendo is the right poster boy for high prices. What Nintendo did wrong, well, one of the many things they did wrong, was to not provide any clarity around how they justify which of their games are subject to the top shelf price of $80 and which aren't, which will now push the floor up on any tier game, not only AAA. Sure, if no one buys those games, the market will correct itself, but the change has been set in motion, even if it doesn't immediately take. Let me reiterate, I don't think there's any universe where gamers are happy that they now can pay $100 or more, at least here in Canada, to their Nintendo overlords for each new re-release of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. More on that right after this. But if there were to be something that made us feel like we were gaining from that additional cost, this amount of pure and utter disgust could probably have been mitigated. And I'm hearing you through the screen right now asking me what that possibly could have been. Well, off the top of my head, at least for the introductory wave of Switch 2 software, throw us some freebies. Maybe a year of Nintendo Switch Online or a discount on the accessories hidden behind the NSO paywall. I'm sure Nintendo could have thought of something. What I can and will blame Nintendo for, though, is re-releasing an original Switch launch title, launch meaning 2017, an 8-year-old title, with Breath of the Wild inclusive of DLC for $90 for the Switch 2 enhanced version, more than full price. 8 years later. I don't have any explanation for that one. Nintendo, the business, definitely pushed it too far with that. I can't see anywhere back from that. Doubtful that matters to them anyway, because there are certain people who will buy it anyway. To make matters worse if they weren't bad already, Nintendo has now also delayed pre-orders in Canada alongside the US. Can't say I'm surprised if I'm being honest, but what has surprised me though has been the almost daily developments we've been seeing with the ongoing trade wars. I'll try to summarize the latest and what this may mean going forward. China is now facing tariffs of 145%, but the Trump administration has offered a small concession whereby excluding electronics including smartphones, laptops, hard drives, memory chips, flat panel monitors, and solid-state storage devices, as well as machines used to make semiconductors. This will benefit big tech companies like Apple, Samsung, and chip makers like Nvidia. However, because video games and video game consoles are classified differently than what I listed earlier under the harmonized tariff schedule of the US, unfortunately, they don't appear to be included in this round of exemptions. What this will mean is that the cost to manufacture the Switch will rise and put downward pressure on the retail cost to us, the end consumer. Like I said before, Canada's pre-orders have been delayed as well, and that's because if any of the distribution channels for the Canadian market involve consoles entering the US market before being shipped north, this will directly impact the availability and the cost of the consoles here. We've also imposed retaliatory tariffs on the US in response to their tariffs, adding another layer of complexity to this whole thing. This is to say that if the North American distribution network relies on a central point of entry in the US, our tariffs will lead to increased costs when the console makes its way into the country. I think one good thing that's come out of all this is that I've learned about the interconnectedness of all these different economies around the world to bring us the products that we see lined up on our store shelves, if that's any consolation. Finally, the Trump administration has granted a 90-day tariff reprieve for all countries except China and have reduced rates to a baseline of 10% while the countries come together and negotiate how to move forward. All in all, I'm not sure what the end game is here, and I'm not sure if there's any game plan at all. What I do know is that life is only going to continue to get more expensive for us. China isn't sitting idly by either. In response to the US tariffs, they hit back with their own tariffs on US imports at 125%. Former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen told CNN that no one knows where these policies are headed, and to be honest, that's a big concern to regular folks like you and me. And I can't blame Nintendo for pausing pre-orders in North America. There's far too much uncertainty right now and the landscape is changing every day. So again, Nintendo as a business has made the right decision. I've heard some creators in the public saying that they shouldn't have gone back on what they promised at the Nintendo Direct and released the first wave of consoles at the price they announced. But when we take a step back and try to consider all of the moving parts, this release is much more complicated than launches we've seen in the past. Let's be real, Nintendo isn't going to take an even bigger haircut on its profits than they originally planned because of market conditions that are completely out of their control. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with Nintendo for pausing pre-orders, or should they not have walked them back like they did? Let me know down below. In summary, it's no secret Nintendo has completely botched this launch, their communication with the public, and it's pretty clear they don't seem to understand or care about the ripple effects of what they're doing when it comes to pricing. They keep doubling down on their nonsense with more nonsense, but from a strictly business standpoint, again, stripping out how I'm feeling about the whole thing, I can see how they're arriving at their decisions. Not about that Breath of the Wild re-release though, that's just straight crap. Their executives seem to be too far removed from their target demographic, but I can understand the spirit of the messaging they want to put out. Finally, with how complex global market conditions have become with the ongoing trade wars, Nintendo is trying to mitigate the amount of risk they're taking on with the North American release of the Switch 2. As much as I would love to see the Switch 2 ecosystem not get any pricier than it already is, I also don't see Nintendo taking massive losses on one of their most anticipated launches 8 years on from the original. If that helped you gain a bit of a different perspective on what the business of these launches looks like, give this video a thumbs up so we can continue to educate our frugal gaming community. Making better buying decisions come from a place of knowledge and not emotion, but does any of this change anything about my decision to buy the Switch 2? It doesn't. I'm still in the camp of let's wait and see. Click here to see my breakdown of what we found out about the Switch 2 before all the craziness, and like always, play more, pay less. See you on the next one.